This is The Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited, and I'm your host, Kate. How many times in recent years have you reflected on how connected we are now, and just how lonely we are in spite of it? Last year, the U.S. Surgeon General released an advisory report declaring an epidemic of loneliness, a condition that impacts our mental and physical health as individuals and on the broader scale of public health. The treatment for loneliness is social connection, and even then, the answer is quality over quantity. Why does connection make us healthy? I think the answer is that it fulfills a fundamental human need, to feel that I belong. But why do we crave belonging? And what does it have to do with work and health? I had the fortune to meet today's guest when we served on a panel discussion about psychological safety earlier this year. She has studied the intersection of workplace culture and health, is a mental health advocate, and is dedicated to working alongside business owners to fix today's broken workplace. Welcome, Colleen. Thank you for joining me in the comfy chairs. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm going to do that, but first I want to say I love the title of the podcast, Comfy Chairs.
Thank you.
I'm like, I have to say that when I get started. And thank you for having me in one of your comfy chairs. It's always an honor to be invited. So thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. So introduce myself. So long-winded short, I help small businesses create workplace environments that employees actually want to be a part of. And basically what that means, and this will probably play itself out in our conversation down the road, but basically what that means to me is we have a huge area of opportunity in our workplaces. And the fancy word is culture, but I call it the workplace environment. And so last year, I took a challenge on myself, left corporate, and founded my own culture consulting business that focuses, again, strictly on creating workplace environments that employees want to be a part of. My heart sits in small business, and it sits there for a couple of reasons. And I think we've talked about this offline, but it sits there for a couple of reasons because big businesses have a lot of red tape, right? I mean, they play a big, important role in, economy overall, but small businesses do too. I mean, ultimately, they make up half of at least the U.S. economy. I'll speak to our stat, right? And there's just less red tape. And so things can get done a little bit more efficiently and oftentimes, I mean, we'll say so oftentimes, there's a little bit more reciprocity in wanting to make it great because that turnover piece, like losing one employee for a small business, costs a lot of money. So that's where my focus is. And so what that very long-winded kind of piece there is to say that it's small business culture. I do have a PhD. What I love about it is it's another way to help bring solutions to the table and just to help think differently. So I am a PhD by background and have published in a couple of those areas of culture in the workplace.
What you've shared with me about your research sounds really interesting and really necessary right now. I'm curious, before we dive into our stated topic, why do you prefer to talk about environment over culture? Yeah,
so for me, I believe culture is a little shiny object right now.
Yes.
So that's one. I think that it is the in thing right now. And so not just so, and also when I think about the small businesses that I'm really honing in on, especially like in that construction space, that's where I'm honing in from a business standpoint. I don't think the word culture resonates when at the end of the day, it really is about the environment. And I think environment resonates a little bit more because it's also something that we go home to. We go home to a different environment. When we go shopping, it's a different environment, or right? Like it's all around us. The neighborhoods that we visit, that's an environment. And so I feel like it's a little more of a layperson's term
Okay.
to hopefully make it
Yeah.
clear.
No, I understand that. I'll, I'm trying not to take us down a rabbit trail here because
Go for it.
I have opinions, Colleen. One of them being, one of them being that I think if we are intentional about defining culture or environment, um, it loses some of that shine, if you will, because it does make it makes it conceptual so people can like grab hold of it and understand. And what
Yeah.
I do think they're somewhat interchangeable, but what I like about culture is in that space, it has so much to do with the contribution of everyone involved. I've defined in my past work that culture is the beliefs, the behaviors, um, the intentions and motivations, if you will, that we all bring to the experience of working there. In my mind, environment seems a little like less out of our control. And that, I mean, again, this is a bit of a bunny trail, but it's an interesting way. And some of that may be that I came up through organizational development in a large company. So some of those buzzy words, those jargon pieces were just part of how we did business with each other.
Yeah,
But I
so
like it. I like it as
yeah,
a concept and understanding your point of view. Thank you.
yeah, no, I appreciate it because of course I know we don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I now you've you've gotten me thinking about another thing, which is also I think a hard concept to understand, which also is why I say environment because it's all encompassing, is when we talk about culture, often we forget about climate.
Mm,
And
you're right.
culture and climate, right? Culture and climate are two different things. Culture is what we say, climate is what the reality is. And sometimes those are so out of alignment. Yeah, it's messy,
It is
right? It's
messy.
not as
It
easy as we
is.
think.
Well, and that's, this will, I think, ultimately come back to this
I
idea
think
of
so too.
belonging because
Yeah.
I would, I think the way we could maybe think about it is the culture is the sphere, the planet, if you will. Um, and then the environment and the climate are what we kind of live in where we're
Yes.
standing. And if you are in, if you are on a planet in an environment with a climate that doesn't suit you or that doesn't foster belonging, it just leads to bad things. And at the end of the day, this is really complex stuff that has a couple of kind of simple solutions. Some of making good culture, making healthy environments, making sustainable climates, if you will, it boils down to, I'm wildly oversimplifying it here, is not being a jerk to other
Thank you.
people, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we could drop the mic and end this right now and say literally it gets back to just being kind.
Yes, right? And I don't mean like if I feel it's not me, don't be a jerk. It's if I'm a leader, it's how I treat other people.
Yeah.
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 I am all about you with simplicity because I think we have turned it into really what feels challenging when it
Yeah.
is really, I hate to use the word just, but I'm going to. It's just about being a kind human.
Right.
That's it. That's
Right.
it.
That's what it comes down to. I've said this before on the podcast, and because it's my personal motto, professional motto, it will always come up again. Um, what I, after all these years working with people in human resources and learning and development and consulting, what I believe is people are awful, and you've got to love them.
Yeah.
Because even the best of us sometimes make bad choices, huge mistakes, selfish decisions, and what we all need to kind of get through all the difficulty is some love and grace.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you hit it perfectly. We all do something
Yeah.
incorrect or wrong or say or and I really don't believe that there's I mean, yes, there's some malice that probably comes from like right there just are some
Right.
bad humans, right? But I do believe that people genuinely want to do the right thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, giving that grace and saying and kindness and thoughtfulness and patience.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we could talk about a whole different thing
I
today.
know we could, but I think at the end of the day, all of that, because the
I totally agree.
behaviors around us are what create, I think, whether or not we feel we belong.
I totally
So,
agree.
and we've hit on one of the things. I think the topic itself has so much nuance. It is
Mm,
somehow both wildly individual, but also fundamentally universal for people, that I do want to
mhm.
keep the questions that I have for us today pretty simple. But
Perfect. Yeah.
again, I think we're going to end up talking about some complex things. I always like to start with meaning. Belonging can be one of those shiny words that gets tossed around right now. It's been in favor a lot recently. What do we mean when we say belonging?
So, so, and it's funny as I'm gonna respond to this, I'm thinking about the whole culture, environment, climate, because I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
operational definition person,
Love it.
right? To start, because we get super muddy, and I respect that things are gray. Like I get it, but I think to level set so that we can all understand, right, where at least our conversation is coming from, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'm big operational. So So the definitions that I use, and these are not my definitions, right? These are Psychology Today, Maslow's definite, like
Mm-hmm.
these definitions belong to other people. They are not mine. So the way that I like to talk about belonging is in almost like a kind of like an umbrella, sort of three. I don't even want to say step or linear because it's intricate,
Yeah.
but I'll start with the umbrella being belonging. And so belonging is by definition, and again, this goes back to Maslow from 1940 and his hierarchy of needs, which again, he even stated like that hierarchy really is messy and it's not a
Yeah.
hierarchy. That's neither here nor there. But the way it was defined was the human need for interpersonal connection and acceptance. Okay. But the way then those that have studied it beyond him have reminded us that it's not only about being connected to people, but being connected to a place. So through community and emotional attachment. So when we have that feeling of, gosh, I just feel like I'm home,
Yes.
right? That's that place piece that still falls under the belonging umbrella. This, I think, is a really interesting add to the definition. Power, not power as in I'm going to overpower you or I'm above you, but power as in my personal feeling of ownership and a shared outcome. And then the other is purpose. And that's the other big piece that's coming up a lot today, which is a sense of mission with others. So again, belonging itself, and this is just the umbrella. I'm going to go down two more. So from there, then I would say we hear this word social connection a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? So belonging leads us to that social connection. And that's that continuum. So how big, how broad, how diverse is my social network? And are these relationships within this social work, or sorry, within this social network, are they delivering positive or negative to me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then from there, and this will be my last one, and then I'd love to throw in a personal example, but I want to make sure I ask you to reflect on it, the how I defined it if you'd like. But from there, we have to then talk about loneliness
Yes.
because that's how it's measured. That's how all of this is measured. And so again, I think anytime belongingness is being talked about, we hear social connection, we hear loneliness, and it gets, what are we talking about, right? So that loneliness is the measurement. That's how it's being measured. And so then just to finish with again this operational definition, that's the state of distress or discomfort that results when I'm perceiving, so the person is perceiving a gap between this desire that I have for social connection versus what I'm actually experiencing. So again, I have like a practical example that I can put like take the
Please.
three components. Okay. So here's a practical example, again, thinking about belonging, social connection, and then loneliness. So 2023 is when I made a personal decision to leave my corporate career.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that because what was coming up over the several years leading up is I realized that I really no longer felt as though I belonged at that workplace. So
Mm-hmm.
that's that kind of piece in the definition of belonging, right? Again, when I reflect on it, I really no longer felt like I had ownership in a shared outcome. And a lot of that was because I recognized again early on that I had outgrown the work. I no longer aligned with the
Yeah.
purpose or the mission that I had mentioned, right? But that then also meant that I was outgrowing my colleagues because
Mm-hmm.
there was this misalignment. So now this gap is starting to come. And so because of this, because of me outgrowing the work, no longer feeling aligned with my colleagues, my social network inside that community, inside my workplace, started to shrink. And I'll be fully transparent, that definitely led me down the path of loneliness, right? Because as
Mm-hmm.
humans, we're hungry for social connection.
Yeah.
And so again, ultimately what was happening is that gap that I described when I defined loneliness, it was wide. So that's how I would summarize all of that up with operational definition. But what is like help me try to break through the what may be muddy for someone listening.
Even though loneliness is probably equally as elusive in terms of talking about it and what it means for us and how we define it, both belonging and loneliness are things that when we feel it, we know it. And what matters, you talked about the gap. And I think everything we're talking about in this space is the gap between what I desire and what I experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that can even be kind of these like converse things. I want time alone. And I have a lot of social connections, so I'm not getting them. So there's, exhaustion or disengagement, those things that can result from not taking time for yourself because
Mm-hmm.
what I'm experiencing and what I desire. So one of the ways forward, I think, for all of us, but particularly learning individuals, leaders, business owners, is getting really good at defining that desire. What is it I want in terms of my interpersonal relationships, the place where I work, live, and play, and the level of agency and the connection to the mission that I feel, whatever that setting is. So being able to define our desires, our wants, which can include our needs, is a big part of, we'll get to this eventually, but how do we make belonging happen? I also, when you were talking about social network, I naturally went to social media, and I'm not expert in this at all. I've just done a little bit of reading around parasocial relationships, how we can create a sense of being in a relationship, having a connection with people we've never actually met, but we see their lives, play out on social media or fictional characters in movies, books, or TV, that I wonder if loneliness is on the rise. Because again, Dr. Muthri, declared it as a public health
Mm-hmm.
epidemic last year. If that's on the rise because we encounter so many more people virtually nowadays, we can follow people we will never meet. You can follow Taylor Swift and feel like you know everything that's going on in her life. And you can feel this deep connection to her because we're on social media with each other. There's no boundary there. So those parasocial relationships are giving us an experience that doesn't match the desire.
Mm.
And this is not to say by any stroke that I think there's a problem with social media. I think it's when we begin to substitute And we don't pay attention to the fact that, oh, I have all these connections, I have all these friends, but they're not really fulfilling what it is I truly want and need. And that's
Yeah.
where we have to start educating ourselves, our employees, our children, our communities about the difference between parasocial and genuinely social connection.
Yeah. So I just had one immediate reaction that came up there. I'm going to look at my nerdy paper here because I thought this was a really interesting stat from the U.S. Surgeon General, the resource that did come out.
Yeah.
So it talks about the amount of time people are engaging with 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 friends in person, friends and family in person. The number goes from in 2003, it was 60 minutes a day or 30 hours per month but versus 2022, it went down to 20 minutes a day, 10 hours a month. And the reason that I thought that that might be an interesting time to put this in is exactly what you said about social media isn't bad. It's not social.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not that personal connection, that in-person connection that fulfills so many things from a health standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good segue of why does that connection have a health impact for us, both individually and within our workplaces? Why does it matter for us to be around people?
The science around this from a health standpoint is why. It's fascinating. I think again, COVID put a big spotlight on this. So I always, that to me is a thank you to COVID, because it was already bubbling. Loneliness is not new, right? It's just again heightened. And so ultimately, just in case someone maybe skips over the intro, I believe in your intro you mentioned about that not having that social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
I did not, but that is
okay.
It's
a staggering.
It's staggering. Yes, that's the word. Thank you.
Yes, staggering, because I feel like most of us, I mean, obviously there's some differences in generations and cigarette smoking and all that good stuff, but most of us know, right? Or were around someone that smoked or whatever the case may be, know what that means. So again, that researched correlation is fascinating to me. Yeah. And so ultimately, but it doesn't end there. It basically, because of loneliness, we have a greater risk of alcoholism emerging, depression, social anxiety, cognitive decline. I think sadly that played out in front and center during the pandemic. It's hard to not talk to someone that would say my elderly grandparent or whoever the case may be, neighbor, really saw them decline because they weren't able to go out and socialize. Those things, they weren't able to volunteer. Yeah.
Even school children, both ends of the spectrums.
Yes.
Well, across the whole spectrum, actually. But if you think about, I suspect we are going to be seeing the long-term impact of remote schooling on that segment, this big segment of our population for decades to come.
Yeah.
Because they missed out on in-person, day-to-day social interactions at a really formative age.
I agree. I think when we talk about long COVID, we've been talking about it so much from the physical health piece, but we haven't been talking about it from the mental health side of the house as well, right? Yeah. And I agree. I think we're going to your point, continue to see that carry, sadly, very long. There's one other one that if you're okay, I want to add just one more thing. I think this one is so important. It's not, I think we still have opportunities to talk about this, is that loneliness heightens suicide ideation. And that's a
Yeah.
really important one, right? I mean, that is like that's research supported. And when we were talking about it even just a little bit in the beginning, it is belonging and loneliness is something you can feel. So
Yeah.
I mean, you can feel that other people that may or may not be suffering through it can feel when that's heightened, and especially if they're challenged in the past with suicide ideations and things like that. It's a big deal.
It is.
So it's such a big opportunity um, for us to really hone in and understand how big of an impact on a physical and mental health standpoint belonging, social connection, loneliness, again, keeping those kind of things in mind have, not just on ourselves, but on the world,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Toggling back and forth between societal and workplace. There's our family, our friends, our communities. And I want to make certain I'm keeping us somewhat bound within the workplace since
Yes, I can
since
go a little
we
off.
are no these are the topics where I think we ought and should go off, and I want to also create a little bit of a light, gentle boundary, a permeable boundary about leading and learning again, since that's my stated focus.
Yeah.
And I think in this space, it's how can we educate ourselves around the impact of loneliness, the benefits of belonging, what we can do about each of those for ourselves and the people we love. And then in the space of leadership, what do leaders need to prioritize for themselves, their employees, their teams as a kind of as its own being, and their organizations as well, and the people they serve, even depending on what sector they fall into.
Yeah.
I know one of the things I want to make certain, because belonging has become very much tied to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, that we try to sync that up too, because there may be, I think everything that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, people are a little more open to these conversations a little bit. But the business case for belonging is probably not as hard to make as the business case for diversity was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And there is a business case for it that very much mirrors and echoes the DE&I. So I'm making statements. There's not really a question in there, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'm like, so here's where my mind goes for the DEI when we put the B there. Sometimes I think to myself, did we put the B there because we didn't know where else to put it, when ultimately it could be looked at as the umbrella of an organization? Yes, we go to work to help companies make profit, but we spend more than half of our waking hours there. We see some of our colleagues more than we do our own family members.
Yeah.
It's a community and it impacts our health. It is a social determinant of health. And so I wonder, did we put it there because we didn't know where to put it? But then I say, okay, let's take a step back and look again, think about some of these operational definitions of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And ultimately, when we do feel as though I relate to others look like me, or maybe they practice the same, whatever religion, whatever the case may be, same ethnic background, whatever it is from a diversity standpoint, that then is something I feel that I'm connected to, right? So that's belonging. the equity piece, I mean, that to me is how we can just tackle belonging in general, is remember we have to come at things with equitable opportunities. But then of course inclusion. I mean, to me, inclusion is also how someone feels as though they
Mm-hmm.
belong.
They're
So when I take
synonymous. Yeah.
right, they really are. Sometimes you have to pause and again go back to the operational definitions, because you're like, can you have belonging without inclusion, or can you have one without the other? So then I say, again, this is just me. I'm like, okay, ultimately, I feel like belonging is what wraps around a good DEI effort.
Yeah.
I'll feel like I belong if the DEI effort is truly in place.
So is belonging an outcome of
Yes.
mindful, intentional diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts?
Yes. I
Yeah.
literally had that written down. I'm like, it is an outcome.
Yeah. Yay,
Yeah.
we're on the same page.
Yes.
Which I want to be very cautious about because, yeah, we're two, middle class white women
Right.
talking about
Right.
this. So
Right.
it's no surprise we're on the same page. And I think about, the reading I've done, the people I've talked to in this space, the DEI leaders that I know, and yeah, they would definitely. I don't think I'm misstating to say they would agree with that.
Yeah.
That belonging is the natural outcome of paying close attention to how representative, how many opportunities are spread appropriately, how inclusive you are. And when you have the product, the outcome of belonging, what does it mean for the outcomes of the business? So there's the environmental outcome of belonging, and then the business outcome is all the things that the research shows us.
Mm-hmm.
Higher profits, higher productivity, lower waste, lower injury, whatever measures that you follow. And if you think about loneliness as the measure of whether or not belonging exists, we can kind of say that, and this may be very facile, but any sort of business key performance indicator, KPI, misses probably point to low belonging in that workplace.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can think about environments where I've worked where there hasn't been a lot of sense of belonging. You see it play out in those key performance indicators.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep. And this may or may not, hopefully this segues okay, but where my mind always goes again when I think about the workplace, also I'll leave the KPIs out, but where my mind goes is, if you want, I say this a lot to companies, if you want to solve for mental health in the workplace, solve for inclusion and belonging, period. Period. And that, again, because to me, it's an umbrella. It's the umbrella of a workplace. Yeah. And that, again, so that's how we then tie back to the KPIs and absentee, any medical claim, whatever you want to tie it to.
Yeah.
All the things. It's so you could put it as the umbrella or as the root of the foundation, either one. It's like we have to build it with those things in mind. And that is how we are successful at work.
Yeah. I feel like this is something that has taken us decades, if not centuries, to get to understanding that the performance of our businesses is based on the emotional experience of our employees. And it seems so elementary, rudimentary when I say it out loud. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about why is this the conversation now?
I'm gonna be super forthright here.
Oh, I love it.
It pains me that it's almost a twofold. It pains me that we're still having this conversation. Because I've been doing this work for 25 years. And I'm in my mind, I'm like, we're still here.
Yeah.
We're still here.
Yeah, you're right. You're
right.
right.
So and I can't be sorry because I just literally I sit and I'm like, oh, this is the new rocket science stuff that we're talking about. Right. On it, but then I'll say, I think that I am super thankful for the, again, this is a thank you, COVID. I think it put a spotlight on it. But then also, I think this is a thank you to the generations that are coming now up and out into the workplace. Um, they are helping us, right, understand and see many things. One being that I don't want to work the way y'all have worked.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is shrinking the talent and pool, right? There's got to be talent in like talented people for us to bring into the workplace with gig economy, with so many other ways to make a living that like myself and those, in generations above me, that didn't make, we didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
And so again, back to the initial question of why do we feel like we're here now? I feel like we don't have a choice. We actually do need good talent to come in. And so many that are coming out of college or not even going to college, trades, or just not doing any of that are like, oh, I got this. There are so many ways I can make money.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely
That's
right.
where my mind goes.
Yeah. Right, let me stop saying yeah and organize my thoughts because I am on record of saying, both in this podcast and in other settings, that I always feel a little bit of friction or angst when we tag generations as a reason.
Okay.
So because I don't like labeling people based on their age because that's what that comes down to.
Yeah, you're right.
And the point that I make is if you take a statement about generations, good or bad, and you put any other demographic nomenclature in there, it becomes something that's highly biased, if not wildly prejudiced. What always comes to mind for me is this ridiculous headline I saw a few years ago that was millennials have ruined the wine market. Well, what if I said, Catholics or
anything,
any other demographic? And so I get a little anxious around saying, I hear a lot of people in the people ops space talking about, Gen Z coming into the workplace. And yes, of course it is, because if anything does define a generation, it's not necessarily when we were born, but it's those shared experiences that we have.
Yeah.
That do happen in time. And the technologies and how we were raised. All that good stuff. But the things that I have heard so many HR and similar leaders say over the years that really gets my blood pumping is, well, millennials want this or Gen Z wants this. It's like, do you hear what you're saying? That's what we want too. It's about, back to what we said earlier, it's about be kind, don't be a jerk to your people.
Yes.
Millennials want, consistent feedback. I'm solidly Gen X. I want it too.
Yeah, I do too. Yes.
Millennials want flexibility. I'm almost 50. I want flexibility too.
Same.
Gen Z is just really attuned to mental health. You know what? I have depression and anxiety, and I really want to work in a workplace that doesn't exacerbate it, but also provides support.
Same.
So I do think the kind of swell that rise and fall that we see in the retirement of people, basically the ages of our workforce, rather than any explicit, discrete generation, is definitely at play there. I'm always cagey about saying this is because of Gen Z. This is because of the boomers.
And I'm so glad you went there. I appreciate you because I really am with you on that. Like I love the way that you excuse me phrased it. Because at the end of the day, that's like when those conversations start being had, I literally go through everything you just said. I'm like, I'm Gen X and I want
Right?
all these things.
Now here's the thing. I have this thing where I'm like, it's not about generations. I hate when people say generations, and I love being Gen X. So
Right.
I want it both ways. But it's a community. It is a point of connection and belonging because, hey, we have these similar reference points. You know, we were the latchkey kids at a rate that our parents weren't, or the half generation ahead of us. You know, we remember Swatch watches and United Colors of Bennington and
telephone cords that wrapped around the wall.
Oh, sweet mercy. How you had to spend all this time, like, if you had even a little bit of OCD, trying to get the stretched out cord back into shape. That is an experience that people younger than us just don't share. And that shared experience becomes a point of connection and belonging.
Yes. Yeah.
I am going to use that to pivot to the next topic I want us to talk about.
Okay.
Is what can we do to create belonging for other people? And I would say right off the bat is provide shared experiences.
Yeah. I would say I'm actually going to go back to when we started this conversation, because you said something that I'm like, that to me is actually where I think our biggest opportunity is to start. And it is this, to start with me, to start inward. What's my why? What's my what do I want? I think that sadly, and I've done the same thing. Sadly, we start out and we don't start in. We start in later. Oh, but that is ultimately where I believe that we do need to start. So, anyways, I would say there. And then I start to go to other areas of opportunity. And yes, I promise I'll get to workplace stuff, and some of this does, like where my mind goes for this, does go workplace, but like pick up the phone, whether that's like your Zoom phone or whatever the case may be. There is something in a phone call that can create a shared experience that cannot be done over a chat. This again is so basic, and I know that it's okay, we have to think about hybrid and things like that, but shared experiences do come around food.
Oh, yeah.
And so
definitely, if you feed them, they will come.
You pack your own, they will come. And even if you pack your own lunch, when I think back to one of the practices, my parents owned a construction business, so one of the things that I believe made my dad such an amazing business owner, small business, he ate lunch with his guys every single day, 30
awesome.
minutes. And he did not talk shop. He talked about cars. He talked about whatever all of them were into. And then when lunch was over, he talked shop. That's how we can create a shared community, a shared connection. It doesn't matter if I understand what the car is that you're talking about. I can demonstrate interest and learn and ask questions, and right. So to me, that's workplace. That's not workplace, right? That's even at home, family meals.
Yes.
This other one this starts to get into communication, which I think is ultimately at the root of a lot of this too, is just listening, right? Listening without distraction. I mean, how many times are we checking our phone or, whatever the case may be? And so it's in a meeting, put it away, leave it in your bag. When you're out with your family, walk, if you walk, have a dog or whatever the case may be, I respect having it for safety reasons, but put it aside, right? So you don't have to focus on it. And I mean, this again is also like workplace, but it's just life in general. Is think about that person that's walking into your workplace, or again, maybe it's not in person, maybe it's on Zoom. They need a smile. They need to not feel like they're a stranger in a strange land, because they do.
Uh-huh.
Right. And we need be authentic, like reach out, say, let me, or put meetings on their calendar if it is a remote workplace, right? My mind, of course, goes, in person, because construction is in person typically, but
Yes, it is. It's hard to
but
build things virtually.
yeah, but like so virtually we have to just be more thoughtful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like when a meeting ends, you're not going to have that water cooler or whatever, get out of your office and like all debrief on the meeting, but you can pick up the phone,
Yeah.
whatever, however that looks, again, whether it's a Zoom phone or whatever the case may be. Um, the other one that I want to throw in, and this is so heavily researched, is volunteerism. And that
Oh,
again, so
yeah.
to me, work outside of work. I mean, so many of these are just crossover principles. Volunteerism it increases social connection, therefore
Mm-hmm.
belonging,
It
and
really
takes away
does.
loneliness, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think,
I want to
of
make a
course,
little,
like, oh,
oh,
please, yes, I'm just
no,
babbling away.
no, no. I want to have a little footnote. You said they cross
Yeah.
over, and something that I think I've talked with another guest before about this. I don't think it's an entirely new idea, but
Yeah.
talking about work, not work-life balance, but life and work is one of our subsets. So naturally, the stuff that we're talking about today is a thread that runs through home, community, friends, family, work, because it is all part of our life. And rather than trying to segregate or compartmentalize, it's what I experience here is going to mirror what I experience there. So, how am I doing the same things that create the benefits that belonging does?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because it is the work. I'm not a fan of work-life balance. It's life.
Yeah.
Work is one of the levers that we pull, and again, it just happens to be an area that we spend a lot of time in, but it doesn't mean we're different there.
Yeah.
We are who we are.
I want to go back to something you just said a few minutes ago. It starts with me. I think is always a powerful statement and this goes to power and agency that we
Yep.
discussed earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that we do have to have that self-knowledge, understanding of myself about what are my levers, what does make me feel like I've been seen and acknowledged, what puts me at dis-ease, because belonging isn't something that happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
We are a participant. It's with me and through me
Mm-hmm.
that I experience belonging. If I'm standing to one side and waiting to belong, it's likely not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, am I aware of myself? Do I have, kind of that personal operating instructions, understanding of who I am and how I function, so that in those settings where I don't feel I belong, I can identify why and either rectify it or remove myself.
I love that you wrapped that back around. It is, and the other thing that you said, you're right, it doesn't happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
We play a very big role in it. Understanding who we are can help us realize, what role do I want to play or not play?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to just stand on the side because it doesn't align with me?
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is a topic that I like to use the term double vision when speaking about it, because you have these two things that you have to keep in focus. There's my responsibility for myself, and then my responsibility to others,
Mm-hmm.
because both are true.
Mm-hmm.
in this case. I am responsible for that self knowledge, for taking part in my surroundings to the best of my ability, based on my circumstances, all the things that wrap around. But then I also have a responsibility to other people to extend the welcome, to, as appropriate, go out of my way to include people so that they can have belonging.
Yeah.
So it's not one or the other.
Yeah.
This is where balance comes in. It's not work life
Yeah.
balance. It's self and other balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I may, I love what you said about the go out of my way, because my mind immediately went to the workplace, of course, and I was thinking of in groups versus out groups,
Yeah.
which is natural, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we naturally again migrate to people that maybe have similar views or shared phone cords, you know.
Right. Well, there's also let me align with people that I think have positional or social or
Hmm.
fill in the blank power
Yes.
as a way to feel safe.
Yes.
That's part of why we click and we
Yep.
tribe, because it community makes us feel safe.
Yes. And that's though the importance of recognizing in groups can only take us so far in a business.
Mhm.
So, right. And then those that are on the outside, we're not giving them the opportunity
Mhm.
to come in. So that's now where all of the DEI pieces play, because we're not bringing them in and along, even though they may look at things different or understand things differently, which is why I think it's so important for organizations to be extremely aware of the fact that that's natural, but the opportunity around belonging is to be very mindful of in groups and out groups and
Yeah.
how those practices are playing in culture and climate. We took it all the way back around.
Oh my goodness, look at us go. How do you think, I mean, other than just using your ears and eyes, leaders can be attuned to in and out groups? What are some of the signs and symptoms?
So I think again, it starts with the leader.
Hmm.
Um,
Always and forever.
Always and forever, it starts with the leader. They they are in a they are in a challenging seat. I think that if they don't, they have to understand, what do I align with? What do I tend to tend to lean toward? And then put on a different set of glasses in order to say, okay, what am I missing? And so the way that I do believe that that happens, though, is through things like employee feedback sessions
Yeah.
and employee observations,
Hmm.
right? So because we can only function through the lens and the amount of information that we have, and all of that good stuff. So that to me is the unfortunate thing. And that's why I think things like eating lunch are so important, because with your people, if you have the opportunity, because those feedback sessions just happen.
I love the rise of listening strategy as part of employee experience.
Yes.
That you are intentionally creating and crafting opportunities for people to talk to you.
Yes. And it's a tried and true, again, it's like it's
It,
evidence based.
it's so evidence based. Just leadership responsibility in this space. The eating lunch is such a great example. I was reminded of years and years ago. It was the holidays, so there's the company sponsored holiday meal, the free lunch that we all get. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and yet,
Right.
um, sitting in that cafeteria with, I'm sitting there with kind of a mixed group of people, some of my employees, some of my peers, other teammates, and a big chunk of the executive team walks in, sits down at a table, and eats lunch together.
Mm.
And I looked at one of my colleagues, longtime coworker, and I was like, I understand it. We all want to sit with our friends. You're human too. But that is a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
That is a missed opportunity. A little
Yep.
bit of, 20 minutes of maybe awkwardness for yourself could have created something, frankly, magical within that organization. And instead, you ate lunch with your friends.
Yes. I mean, it's a trust building exercise, which plays into social connection and
Yeah.
belonging.
I have
Yeah.
I have a question that I don't know if I like. I don't know if you will like. Do you think that there needs to be a measure, even to the point of incentive for leaders around things like, are you making those opportunities? How are we looking at intentionally creating, fostering, maintaining, all those juicy words, belonging in your teams?
I actually love this question
Okay.
because I do believe that it, I don't believe in strong arming,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's definitely not a strong arm, but hopefully I'll say this in a way that is clear. I think that when we take ourselves and put ourselves in the workplace, it's like walking into someone else's
Mm.
or home. What
Yeah.
are the rules of your home? Can I leave my shoes on? Do I have to take them off? What are the rules of your home? Can I go into the refrigerator? Can't I? I don't know, right? Tell me what the rules are. And I think that we have to exercise that in a fashion that doesn't feel icky in the workplace.
Yes.
So look, if you're a leader, these are the rules. Like we need you to ensure that you're doing loneliness and whatever the case may be. So I
Right.
am a big believer that it belongs in performance metrics.
Love it. And it's so funny, Colleen. We're in tune because I was earlier thinking about in when you were defining belonging, I'm like, oh, am I comfortable going into someone's house and taking my shoes off? And one of the best things, my husband and I have recently made a new couples friend. We were going over to their house for the first time, and the husband of that couple texted mine and said, "Hey, we're a shoes off house. Just want to let you know." And we are not. We are not a shoes off house. So it was like that is the most gracious, hospitable thing I think anyone's ever done for me.
Because then you're like, I can bring my socks. I don't have to be
Yeah,
uncomfortable in my bare feet. I need to get my
right?
pedicure. I'm making it up.
But that's exactly it, right?
Right?
Like, okay, that's taken care of. And that is one of the ways I think practically, easily, that we can ensure people have comfort. And I'm not saying go to work and take your shoes off, obviously.
Understood. Yes.
And it's things like, hey, this is a place where we do X. I want to make you aware of it so that you're mentally, physically, resource wise prepared for it.
It is people want to know the rules. They really do. They want to understand how to function in your space because it's not mine.
What resources would you recommend to learn more
So,
about this topic,
yeah.
to learn some ways to apply some of the things we've talked about?
So I am going to stay nerdy on this if that's okay.
Oh my goodness, it's
Oh,
always okay, Colleen.
okay.
Talk nerdy to me.
I do believe that the resources, the US Surgeon General's resource that came out
Mhm.
in 2023, I think that they did a phenomenal job of um, of outlining what it is, why it is in regards to the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. So I should probably say the official title. So our epidemic of loneliness and isolation 2023, they did a phenomenal job of just explaining where we are today, where we've been, general practices. I mean, they even include things that families can do.
Yeah.
So it's a phenomenal, phenomenal resource. The other one, because I mentioned this earlier, there's such a crossover with this and mental health as far as I'm concerned in general, but absolutely in the workplace. So in 2022, the US Surgeon General created a framework for workplace mental health and well-being and connection and belonging is has its own pillar. And so, especially from a workplace standpoint, It's a relevant resource, and it's going to be relevant for a long time.
Yeah.
So those are the two that I would highly recommend.
You have a bi-weekly live event that you do. We Built a Bridge.
So yeah, so We Built a Bridge. Thank you for bringing that up. I
Mhm.
appreciate it. So they're really meant to talk on topics that a lot of people maybe don't want to talk about. And it's a light conversation between myself and my co-host.
Thank you. Well, Colleen, I feel like we've known each other for years as opposed to we've been into virtual meetings before this.
I know.
This has been such a wonderful conversation. I do want to start wrapping us up so I don't take us down 50 other paths. I like to close with asking what 2 or 3 big ideas or key takeaways would you want to end with?
Hmm. I Big ideas for me are, and this isn't even a big idea. We've got to stop talking and start doing.
Yeah.
Period.
I agree.
We've got to. It's those of us, I think, again, I'll just kind of keep it on this professional side for a second, and then I'll go, even just in personal. Those of us on the professional side, some of us are so tired.
Yeah.
Because again, we've been talking about it for so long, right? And talking about it, yes, it's important from an awareness standpoint, but we've got to start doing. And then the other that I would add is we've got to get out of our houses. And I'm saying this because I feel it myself. I went pre-pandemic from traveling and being like, I just want to be home, to being home, to then feeling like I really don't want to leave. But I will be fully transparent. There are days when I am like, oof, I am not good today because I didn't get out and have human interaction outside of the walks with my dog.
Yeah. Yes.
So, as hard as it is, get out of our houses, say hello to someone at the gas pump, when you're in line at the grocery store, make a silly conversation. People are hungry for it. That's how I would end. I would just say that.
You're absolutely right. I think I want to put a plug in again for that start with self understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That self knowledge is going to be the first step, not the last step, but the first step to finding where you belong. And it's going to be, if you're a leader, it's a way for you to model and reflect that I've done the work and I want you to have that same experience and that feeling. That knowing yourself, knowing where you're great, where you're wildly uncomfortable is part of how we work here.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said it. People want to know the rules. And that's where we start with helping people fit in, to be included and to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And by my lights, if I want it, if I fundamentally, as a human on this earth, want to feel that I belong, I also want to create that for other people.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. I know that we talked about We Built a Bridge. I'm going to have your website available. Anything that you want to make certain that you have a chance to promote from all of the work that you're doing these days.
I appreciate that so much. I would just thank you so much for the website. So it's just my name, ColleenSaringer.com. And yeah, I mean, I think the only last thing that I would say, if you're a small business, especially in construction, but even if you're a small business and are looking for someone who can really roll up their sleeves and help you get at this in a way that is not going to cost you an arm and a leg, I'm here for it.
Awesome.
I'm here for it.
You've got my vote.
Thank you. And thank you again so much for having me on. I've so enjoyed this conversation.
I meant what I said. I feel like we've known each other for years. It is such a pleasure. It's a gift.
It is a gift. And my cup is so full right now, right? From back to the social connection.
Thanks for joining me in the comfy chairs. Again, as a way to celebrate our first year of hanging out in the comfy chairs, I'm offering a complimentary Everything Disc assessment for one listener. Here's how to enter. 1. Leave a review on any platform where you stream podcasts. 2. Visit 123ltd.com and share your email. That's it. Look for the links that you'll need in the show notes. Everyone who completes these 2 steps between July 16th and August 13th, 2024, will be entered in a drawing. I'll use the email you provide to communicate results no later than August 23rd. And in addition to leaving a rating, please consider subscribing or sharing with others. You'll find comfy chairs updates and other thoughts on leading and learning at Instagram at 123limited. That's ONE23LTD. Thank you.